Hello, everyone. Welcome. I see the first people dropping in. Great that you're joining. Feel free to share your camera if you feel like it. No pressure to do so, but welcome. We'll wait for 1 or 2 more minutes just to see if a few more people will be joining us, and then we're excited to get started. Nice to see some familiar faces whom I haven't seen for a long time, as well as some new people. So really great that you're all joining. Feel free to, in the meantime, already in chat, maybe share a bit about yourself and where you're calling in from today to also get to know the other people. I see some people are still connecting. Welcome, welcome. All right. So yes, feel free to in the chat introduce yourself to the others in the room here today, and then we'll give it 1 more minute for those who had a meeting till 11 sharp and need to jump in between, and then we'll kick things up for today. Already see some first introductions in the chat. Really nice. Also more people joining. Welcome, everyone. Cool. Well, also a very international crowd. Really nice to see. All right, let's get things started. And there might be a few more people joining, but we can kick off already, and I'm sure they'll be able to catch up. So great that you're all here. Welcome everyone to today's webinar. We're very excited that you're joining us today to discuss how to make learning more valuable. And we will explore a framework with you today that can help drive measurable business impact when you're upskilling your teams. So we will be sharing tips, best practices, but also show you how we support organizations that we collaborate with. So, all right, let's start. Before we start, I'm Sophie. I'm a learning solutions advisor at Lepaya, and I collaborate with organizations on a day-to-day basis where we deep dive into their goals, their challenges, and their needs in order to then translate that into relevant, engaging learning experiences. So I'm excited to tell you more today about the learning loop that we have developed that can support you in doing the same. And I'm joined by my colleague, Isabel, who is our product lead at Lepaya.
Hi, everyone. I'm Isabel. I've been working at Lepaya for the past 2 years. And as Sophie mentioned, I'm currently working as a product lead. I have been working in product for the last 9 years, and I'm very passionate about, well, anything on people domain, but especially learning. And I'm very happy to be here today to talk to you about our learning loop and also a bit on how Lepaya can support you with that. So before we dive in, if you haven't done so, please go to the chat and let us know your name, where you're calling from, maybe your role as well, so we get to know each other.
And while you're doing that, in the meantime, I'll share in 1 minute who we are and what we do. So at Lepaya, our mission is to upskill workforces to create real business impact. And our goal is to really empower organizations in offering learning solutions that help develop employees the right skills at the right time to then ultimately help your organization grow and remain competitive. So based on the needs and the challenges from companies that we collaborate with, We have developed a learning loop, and this really is a structured approach to designing engaging blended learning programs that are focused on real application and for which you can then also measure the results. So all in all, our goal is very simple. It is to empower your workforce to drive your company's success. And today we'll tell you all about the loop, which will help you develop L&D initiatives that drive business results. But first of all, why did we develop a loop, and why should learning be aligned with business goals? Well, if we look at research from McKinsey and the World Economic Forum, we see some really interesting figures. As we all know, the world is changing at a really fast pace, and so are the core skills needed in order to remain successful. And this really makes upskilling very important. So first of all, by focusing on upskilling, it will make sure that the jobs will not become displaced in the future. It will also make sure that you can keep pace with all the shifts in business demands that are changing. And then lastly, it will make sure that your teams remain productive. So all of these research shows that learning really needs to be aligned with business goals. And that's why we've developed the loop. And we are really looking forward to sharing more about the loop today, and hopefully inspire you to also already take some first steps yourself after the webinar. All right, so here's what we will cover today. First of all, we will take a look at your biggest challenges in aligning the L&D initiatives with business goals of the organization. Then we'll introduce the learning loop, share some tips and tricks, as well as best practices on how to design those impactful, relevant L&D initiatives. And then we'll also take a look at how Lepaya supports organizations in this process. We will also have time for a Q&A at the end, so feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat along the way. Cool. So to kick things off, let's hear from you. What is your biggest challenge in aligning L&D initiatives with business strategy? So please select one of the options in the poll or share in the chat, and then we'll discuss shortly. See the first answers coming in. A lot around measuring training impact, still a very big topic we see throughout. Also driving employee engagement, so making sure that once you have rolled out the L&D initiatives, employees or learners remain engaged. And I see Ruben mentions a mix of them all. Nice. So, well, what we see is, measuring training impact, definitely the biggest, most voted challenge, followed up by driving employee engagement. And then a tie between identifying the right skills to train and gaining stakeholder buy-in. So thank you all for sharing this. We will definitely make sure to, when we discuss the different steps in the loop, to pay attention to these challenges and give you some more tips and tricks and some best practices that we see from collaborating with different organizations. Today really is the first introduction webinar of a full series. So these inputs really help us to also create future webinars and more deep dive topics as well. All right.
Okay, so I will now explain briefly our learning loop. So our learning loop is a structured way that Lepaya uses to link business goals to learning impact. And well, that's what we want to share today. Very simply put, the learning loop is a continuous process that aligns trends with business needs and business impact. I think you're gonna be able to recognize what we share here, because of course this is Lepaya's understanding, but it was built together with our partners. And I will first start with this brief introduction but I think the most interesting things will come afterwards when we dive into the details of each of those steps. So the loop starts with identifying your business needs and identifying your workplace needs. And this term can be a bit new for some people. So just so you're aware of what we mean when we say workplace need. A workplace need is a grouping of a group of people in the organization. So what we usually call a target audience. The goals of this group of people that, of course, are aligned with the business goals as well, and also which behaviors we identify that these people need to display in order to reach those goals. So a group of people, their goals, and the behaviors we want for them. And of course, this is usually a result of a lot of L&D effort, but together with the business. So that they work together to understand the needs and the business needs and the workplace needs. Once we identify these needs, we can actually then translate them into learning programs, which mean which skills that we want them to learn to be able to display the behaviors, and also how will they learn that. Then you actually need to plan and roll out this program. And this is just one step here, but we know that this is actually a huge thing that takes a lot of effort from L&D. And to actually be able to put these programs to life. So once the programs are running, sorry, we want to keep track of the program's performance. And we want this to be done while the program is running. So it's not something that happens only at the end, but it happens while the programs are running. And we understand that's very important to measure, for example, attendance and engagement, and we'll go more into detail, but also already make adjustments to the programs as they are running. So you always have a bit of a better program for the next group of people. And last, but definitely not least, comes the measuring the success of the program. So this step is after the program finished, and we have a lot of data of everything that happened throughout the program. How do we make sure that we are looking at the business impact, and also that we are identifying new workplace needs that we also need to look into that. And one good thing about the loop is that you can actually join the loop at any stage. You don't need to necessarily go through all the stages every time. So if you're now planning a program, you can already start following this. And every time that you go through this loop, you gather more data and you're able to actually do it better in each cycle. So this is a very brief summary of the loop. And now we're going to dive into all those steps.
Yes, but before we dive into these steps, we are curious to hear. So which of the 4 steps that Isabel just briefly explained usually takes most of your time and energy, or of that of your team? So please cast your vote again in the poll and let us know in chat in case otherwise. Yeah, so identifying the workplace needs definitely it takes most time and energy, but I also see that measuring the success of your program is catching up on this. Cool. So what we see here is something that we definitely also recognize from collaborating with a lot of organizations. So identifying the workplace needs, really deep diving into making sure that you truly understand the need for the L&D initiatives is something that can be very time consuming, but is definitely always worthwhile to invest in, since it will really make sure that you can develop impactful training programs. Followed with a tie on effortlessly rolling out, as well as measuring the success. We definitely see with the planning and the rolling out that it's a lot of project management and operational tasks that are involved with rolling out those L&D initiatives. And the measuring of the success of a program is usually something that is still perceived as a very challenging step that then takes a lot of research in order to do thoroughly. So let's dive into those steps. first of all, step one, identifying your workplace needs. So to be really honest, all too often I still hear, oh, but I just want to develop a program for first-time leaders. And, it should just include the skills in order to become a successful first-time leader in a short amount of time. And this, to be honest, breaks my heart a little bit, because if you want to craft a program that drives real business impact, it is really important that you identify your workplace needs so that you really take a look at the behaviors and the skills that are needed for your organization and for the teams within that organization to drive that business impact. So to truly understand those behaviors and the skills that are needed to drive that business impact, there are some questions that you can ask yourself when setting up new L&D initiatives. So first of all, I would always advise to take a look at the strategic priorities of the next year. Well, it's still Q1 of 2025, so a great moment to dive into those ambitions for this year. Then next, it's also always very interesting to take a look at the trends that are coming up within your industry or for your organization, or maybe even globally. So what we see currently is that AI is becoming a big trend, but also digitalization is, well, at a very rapid pace. Once you have discovered those priorities and then also some of the trends, it is key to take a look at, okay, what behavior change would I then need to see within the organization in order to reach those goals and for my teams to have a positive contribution to those goals. And then the last one is to take a look at the biggest skill gaps. So once you know the behavior change or the desired behaviors that you are looking for within the organization, you can then take a look at, okay, what gaps do I actually see within the organization and the different target audiences? Well, some best practices in this. It already says it in the key questions to ask yourself, but also to ask the business. So make sure that you involve your key stakeholders early on and you ask them the same questions. This will really make sure that everything that you're going to develop is also aligned to their needs. Secondly, dive into that data. So take a look at the employee engagement surveys, at performance reviews, but also what is happening within the market to really make sure that you know what is happening also a little bit below that waterline. And then lastly, prioritize impact. So please stay away from creating those generic one-size-fits-all training programs and really deep dive into those goals as well as the behavior change needed within the organization to reach those goals. So how we usually support organizations in this is that we have an impact workshop. And during this 2-hour workshop, we will first take a closer look at the organizational goals of an organization, the trends that they see. So we really focus on their ambition and context. Well, next we dive into the behaviors needed for specific audiences in order to realize those goals. So this includes the behavior change, but also the behavior you want to see more of. So we really then identify the skill gaps that we currently see for a specific target audience that we're developing an L&D initiative for. Well, then lastly, our L&D expert will translate all of this information into a relevant training program, really making sure that it focuses on training the skills that will unlock that behavior change that is needed to drive those business goals. By focusing on identifying expected behaviors, you can, during and after the program, also more easily measure the impact of the program, which Isabel will tell you a lot more about later. So we collect and we store and we monitor all of the information that we collect in the Lepaya portal, which is a dedicated place where our account teams, but also the clients have access to. So in the portal, you would find an overview of the workplace needs of your company, as well as which programs we then attach to those workplace needs to keep an eye of everything there. And then once we have identified the behaviors and the skills and translated this into impactful learner experiences, it's of course time to plan and roll out these programs, which Isabel will tell you a bit more about.
Yes, thank you, Sophie. So I think we think that you probably already know quite a lot of what happens in the step, as it's something that uh, also in the pool you mentioned that takes quite a lot of time from your day-to-day work. So we wanted to share a bit of things that you need to take into consideration when plan and when doing this step, and how Lepaya usually supports our clients in this process. So when you're planning a program, there are a lot of things that you need to decide. So a lot of big and small decisions. So for example, you need to think about who will participate on this program, not only who is the target audience, but who within the target audience will participate and when. Which dates do they prefer? If there is a day of the week that you should avoid for some reason, is it an online or in-person training? Where will the sessions happen, or who will facilitate those sessions? So there are just a few questions that you need to ask. And for example, also you can see in the screen what's the time between each of the sessions. So if you have a longer program that they're going to learn multiple things, how long should you how should you space the session so they have time to prepare but also apply what they learned? So there are lots of things that you need to decide. And we of course think that having a centralized place to organize all of these decisions will help a lot, that you avoid making some mistakes of forgetting some of the data, or forgetting, or maybe manual mistakes of passing along information from one place to another. So I think you probably are aware of all these things that you need to decide. And so I wanted to show briefly on how the portal could support you with that. So we have a portal, and anything that's important, all the information that's important for the training to happen, they are added to this portal. So the goal is that we stop having the need of lots of back and forth in emails, or a lot of documents that are exchanged, that everything can happen centralized. And we actually had recently a client that shared that they saved over 100 emails doing preparations on planning by having everything in one centralized place. So I think you can all recognize this pain of having all these discussions. Yeah, so our goal here is to have everything in the same place, so you can actually spend less time doing this preparation and spend more time on the things that will require most of your time. As you mentioned, the workplace, identifying workplace needs, where we really think is where you need to focus on. So I will not go into the details, but I think one interesting thing to share is that we also have a quick view of all the programs that require your action. Sorry. So you can know what you need to focus on, and of course you approve the planning, because I think that's important that the final say is on the client. Okay, but this is, I think, one step you probably already know more. We plan the program, we we roll out the program. We have to now, I'm so sorry, track the performance of the program. So I will start with some tips on how to track this program performance, and then share a bit on how we do that today at Lepaya. So a few things that are important to keep in mind when you're tracking and measuring the performance of the program is that it's important that you collect feedback early and often. So the sooner you can get the feedback, the sooner you're able to start adapting and making changes to the program. Of course, you use real-time data. So if you wait 3 months to get the data, then you're going to make decisions based on old information. Very important is to use also qualitative data. So we obviously want to look at the numbers, but the qualitative data will be where you get a lot of information from your learners, and actually will enable you to understand what needs to be improved. So this is usually done by surveys, be it with the learners, but also maybe with the facilitators, so you can get information from them on how the sessions are going, and this will help you make the changes. And then, of course, the last important thing is make the changes as the program is rolling. So don't wait until all the program is over. If you already know that something could be improved, you can already act on that. So it could be something like changing the facilitator, or improving the training session, even changing the topic that that they are learning about, because you realize that's not something that's interesting for your learners right now. So these are only examples. And then on the metrics side, a few things to keep in mind are, well, before the training session, of course, if you're using a digital tool, the sign up rate and the preparation rate. So this will help you understand if people are ready for the training session, if they were able to read or go through the preparation beforehand. And then, of course, the calendar acceptance. So you know if people are planning on attendance. So it's important to keep an eye on that and actually maybe reach out to the people, sometimes even to the managers, to understand if they're not going, why, and if you need to actually reschedule the session. And then after the training session, I think the most obvious one, attendance, that we want to know who actually participated, but then also maybe a facilitator score or a training score that you can actually use this data. So this is a mix of a metric, but also with a qualitative information that you can get. So these are some things that are important to keep in mind. And then what we, of course, in the portal, use the metrics and the tips that I just mentioned. And there are many different dashboards and lots of information that you can get, but I wanted to focus on maybe the most important things to highlight here. So I think two things that we understand are very important to support you is, the first one is the training session status. So especially if you're running multiple programs at the same time, it can get hard to know which data to look at, because of course there are lots of things happening. You're not going to be able to deep dive into all of that. So we created a status to help you easily identify the sessions that need support. So on the coming sessions, you can see risk of low preparedness or risk of low attendance. So based on the preparation, based on the calendar acceptance, we let you know, hey, this is those are the sessions that you need to take a look at and maybe act on before the session happens. And on the past sessions, we also help you with what actually happened. So if there was really a low preparedness, if there was really a low attendance, so you can deep dive into these sessions and understand what happened. And then the second thing is also, and this is not here on screen, but something interesting is the learning history of each employee. So you can also check how each employee has, if all the employees have been receiving learning opportunities on the company, but also how each different person is engaging on the trainings. Okay, so finally, you run the program, you track the performance, you make the adjustments. Now you need to actually measure the success of the program. You want to know if you're having a true impact. So this is, I think, maybe the trickiest step and one thing that takes also quite a lot of time. So when it comes to impact, there are a few things that are important for you to look at. So the first thing is that we also support here is intention alignment. Basically, how close are actual learners' intentions to the goals of the program? So what we want to see here is what the learners want to learn or that they are currently struggling with aligned with the goals and behaviors that we have mapped on the beginning. Because if those things are not aligned, then we're probably not going to see the impact that we expected. Then the second thing is application rate. So how many learners are applying the new skills on their job. Because of course, we don't just want them to learn something, we want them to change a behavior on their job. Then the third thing is what we call go relevance, which is are learners changing the behaviors aligned with what we said in the beginning of the program. And the fourth thing are the emerging needs. So what are the topics that are raised by participants that should be part of future programs? Or what are other learning needs that we identified during the program that we need to look at? So at Lepaya, we also look at all those things, and we focus specifically in the behavior change part. So we use a lot of learner input to show how many learners are taking steps towards the expected behavior that we had in the beginning. And this is what I mentioned that we call goal relevance. And we also use learner data and also input from different other places to support you with what are other needs that you can keep an eye on. And of course, all of this is measured with the data that you collect during the program. And I think this is the most important thing, that you try to collect all this data while the program is running, so you don't have this huge step in the end where you have to collect a lot of things. So this is one of the things that we also aim for. Once the program is over, you already have all this information at your hand. And I think that's also something you should try to go for. But okay, this is a lot of things. How can you start looking at impact if you don't have this data yet? So we prepared also a few questions and a few tips that you can ask yourself to be able to then look at impact at the end of the program. So while measure impact is often mentioned as one of the most challenging things, because it's all mentioned as one of the most challenging things, we have these questions here. Those are questions that you should hopefully do in the beginning of the in the beginning of the program. But if you're joining the loop in the middle, so if you're currently running a program, you can still ask those questions so you can measure impact at the end. So a few questions are, imagine that it's 1 year from now, and you're presenting the impact of these programs that you design to the leadership team. What key results would you highlight to them? Also, if this program is a huge success, what tangible improvements will you see in 1 year that we wouldn't see otherwise? What existing training programs have worked well in the past and why? So we can, of course, always use the knowledge that we already have in-house. And what blockers typically prevent employees from applying new skills, and how can we address these blockers? So these are some questions to ask yourself, but also to work together with the business in here, and some tips that I wanted to share regarding that. So I think it's important that you try to define success metrics early. If you're not able to because you're running the program already, it's okay. It's better to do that now than to not do it. But if possible, on the next program, try to do it before. First, because it's well, if we leave it to later, there's a higher chance that we don't do it. But also, when things are already happening, we tend to be a bit biased. So it's good to have a clear view in the beginning of where we're going, even if this changes afterwards. It can change. And then the second tip is, besides thinking of business goals, of like the high level things that you're targeting for, also try to think about leading indicators. So measuring the impact of learning directly on a business goal can be very tricky, especially because the business goal is usually a very like big metric that have a lot of actions that are going to target this business metric. It's not just learning. So there are lots of other things also targeting that. So how do you know the impact of learning? So we think that's very important, that you also have other KPIs that will help you see this impact. So thinking about an example, maybe your business metric is turnover. So you're having a high turnover in your technology department, and you ran an ENPS. And this in the ENPS, you realize that most people are commenting that the leaders are not having available time for them. So they are not spending a lot of time with their direct reports. So you can have as a business metric the turnover. This is what you're targeting. This is your goal. But if you're measuring the success only on turnover, it will take quite a lot of time for you to be able to see the results of your program. So you're targeting this, but of course, you're also going to look into the ENPS, because ENPS is a metric that you have a bit more often. But even in NPS, maybe you do that once a quarter, once a semester. So it's also going to take a bit of time for you to see the results. So what metric can you use to see a bit of impact even sooner? So in this case, because you identified that the leaders not having time available is one of the reasons that the employees are leaving the company, you can actually measure the amount of one-on-ones that the leaders are doing with their employees. So you can have a very, very simple metric, let's say something that you can measure very frequently, and that you know that if this is increasing, there is a high chance that ENPS is increasing, and also the turnover is getting better. So you're not measuring turnover, you're looking into that, but you have some leading indicators that will tell you, are we going in the right direction? But yeah, I think I talked quite a lot right now. I'll move along to Sophie.
Perfect. And with that, actually, Isabel closed the loop. And like Isabel mentioned, you can enter the loop at any point, but these are the four biggest steps that we see. So identify your workplace needs, plan and roll out the program, track your performance, and then take a look at that impact to measure the real success of your program. So we've covered a lot, and we would love to hear from you what excites you most about this approach. Feel free to share your thoughts in chat. And if thinking about what excites you the most is still a bit difficult, then maybe share what are you not convinced of yet, or what do you still find challenging, and why is that the case? We'll wait a little bit. I see some first questions also coming in. All right, so feel free to still add anything else in the chat. But to wrap up, I think there are three takeaways that we would love to share with you. So first of all, training or L&D initiatives must be linked to business goals, and really make sure to involve your business stakeholders in this early on. Then secondly, try to set up a structured approach to identify those workplace needs, translate them into L&D initiatives, roll them out, keep an eye on those metrics, and then close that loop by analyzing the real impact. And you don't need to wait for a new initiative to start working with that structured approach, because you can really start working with it at any time. And then lastly, well, next to developing those relevant and engaging training programs designed for the application of skills, we as Lepaya always aim to support in seamlessly rolling those out and measuring the impact of the programs. We will share all of the materials that we presented with you today, and we really hope that you can already take a first step yourself. But you're also always welcome to plan a free session with one of our experts to help you take that first step in the loop and see what it could mean for you and your team. Or take a look at the skill gap analysis tools to already discover some first skill gaps of your teams. And lastly, we hope to see you during next webinars, where the next one will actually be on the 27th, where we will focus on how to position yourself as a strategic partner to your business stakeholders. So also definitely something that will support you in taking the steps of this loop. Well, thanks again for joining. If you still have any questions, feel free to stick around. We're happy to answer them. Feel free to drop them in the chat. And otherwise, we look forward to continuing the conversation with you soon.
Thank you.
All right. So I saw a question from Carolina in the chat, which is around getting stakeholders buy-in when training is often not their priority. Isabel, do you have some first thoughts, or I'm happy to share as well.
Yeah, I think what I mentioned in the end when we talk about metrics, if you are able to present a bit on which metrics you're trying to impact, how you're going to measure that. I think when we use this language of metrics, it's also a good way for us to connect with business. So having this thought process, not working together with them, but having this thought process of how do I measure, how do I show that, is also a way for us to gain a bit of the trust when it comes to like saying, hey, learning actually has quite a lot of impact on the business that you're trying to achieve. Because at the end, you're targeting the same thing. You're not each going into one direction, you're targeting the same thing. So I think that can help show that to the business side that you're actually there to support them with that.
Yeah, I would definitely agree by really making sure that it's visible for your stakeholders what effect the training will have on the goals of the team or the goals of the organization. This shows relevance, and this will make sure that they will also start prioritizing training over maybe an internal meeting, or they will allow for their team members to make some time to attend those training sessions. It will also make sure that training is more top of their mind, so that they will check in on how the training went, and create some learning opportunities on the job. But we also, another intervention that we actually have for this are manager packages. So we inform managers, of course, about the training program that is coming up and whom of their team members will be attending that training program. But also for each of the training topics, in the week of that training, we share a one-pager with the manager, which includes the learning objectives of the training, but also the theory, the key elements of the theory discussed, and then some conversation starters. So really 3 questions that they can ask during the next one-on-one to check in on the goal, see if they can support in the application of their new skills on the job, maybe share some personal examples of how they have had challenges with this skill or how they have developed this skill themselves. And these are also always nice tools to use to really make sure that the stakeholders that their managers have buy-in also during the training program. Are there any other questions? I don't see any more questions in the chat, but if any questions still pop up later, feel free to always reach out. And if not, I hope to see you during one of our next webinars. Please stay in touch and reach out in case there's anything you would like to discuss further. And then I thank you once again for joining. Hope this was very helpful for you, and we hope to see you around. Have a great day. Bye.